Good afternoon, evening, my YouTube family. How's everybody going? How's everybody going? How's everybody doing tonight? Um, so here's a little unique situation. Normally, when I have a problem with a car here in the shop, what I'll do is I'll work. What? Kathy's going like this.
You have
What?
grease on your face.
I have grease on my
Other
face.
side.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Do I look good now?
Perfect.
All right. Good enough for YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So typically when I have I'm working through a problem with a car, one of our cars, I kind of keep it to myself and then I'll do a video afterwards and I'll sum up what I found. I'll give you the nuts and bolts of it. But this time around with Plan Z, I'm kind of like doing it as we go. So you guys can see all of the various issues and the troubleshooting process that goes through it. And like I said in the video we posted today, part of YouTube is that it's kind of an interactive experience. It's like the comments are there for you to give feedback and give ideas. And what happened was I'm going through the video and I'm looking at the comments and I'm like, okay, I gotta answer this, I gotta answer this, I gotta tell this guy, I gotta explain this, I gotta straighten it. And I'm like, no, wait, I can't. I'll literally be here for the rest of the night typing answers and then like getting replies and going back and forth. I can't do that. So what I want to do is I want to go through the comments from the video that we posted today, and hopefully the guys who made these comments are on here now. And we can go back and forth, but let me run through these first in no particular order, and I'm not going to read all of them, obviously, there's no need to, but there were questions, there were suggestions, there were ideas, and I want to address those. So let's start here. I'm going to go to the bottom, the oldest comment first. So, and this is like Edge to Sword posted. It's always our own cars that are the hardest to diagnose and remedy. If that were a customer car, it would be 100% right now. You're so right. You're absolutely right. For some reason, when you're working with somebody else's car, the answers are clear and obvious, and you just go ahead and do it. When it's your own car, it's different. And I think it might be sort of like a psychological, emotional, barrier, because you say, well, I don't want to change this, I don't want to change that, I like this or I like that. And so you kind of like dance around things, where if it's a customer's car, you just point and you say, change that, do that, and boom, so you're right. Love the colorway distributor cap. Somebody here mentioned the guy named Bob Wright, and I've heard that name, Bob Wright. I think he ran a super stock car up here in Winnipeg, did amazing things with Slant 6. Dodge even came here and tried to pick his brain to find out what he was doing. We'll go past that. I'm sure he did great. Ray Brentsyke, how about a change of brand or type of spark plug? I've been using Autolights for so long, I'm accustomed to the way they read. I like Autolights, and this goes back to my Nitro days, because that's exclusively, Autolights were the only plugs that would actually hold up. Occasionally we'd use NGKs when like an NGK deal would come around, they'd give you a couple hundred spark plugs, and we'd burn through them, but the Autolights were always the most reliable. So, it's just something that's like a prejudice that's stuck with me since. I don't think the problem is in the spark plugs, and I did check each individual spark plug. Douglas Filer, do you have flow issues in the intake manifold? Like some cylinders get more or less fuel due to different runner lanes. Doug, the plug readings were, when I say more even than I would have expected front to back, and yes, there are fuel distribution issues with the Slant 6 intake manifold, but I worked through those. And now, like I said, when I look at the plugs, they're even, 1 through 6. 6 was a tad darker than the others, but not enough to like say, okay, there's a problem here. So no, I'm not having fuel distribution problems through the manifold. Now that's not to say once the engine actually kicks up and runs that it won't, but at this point right now, no, I'm not seeing anything at all like that. Do you see why I had to do a live? Because if I tried to answer these comments and give them any sort of, I'd be typing all day, and I just don't have time for that. The Servant, blockage in exhaust. There is no exhaust. There are 3-into-1. It's 2 3-into-1 headers, and they have each header has like a 1-foot collector extension on it. And I think that actually might be too much. I'm probably going to trim them back, but I can't make a judgment call until the car actually makes a full clean pass, and then I can look for a heat signature on the extenders and figure out where to cut them back to. But no, there is no exhaust system to have a blockage. Thirsty Gnomes, I thought you had a new engine to build for this car, and it's the red one that's sitting over on the workbench right now. And the purpose of that engine is to take anything we learn from this. And remember, this is YouTube, so I got to keep things moving, right? So whatever we learn from this, if there are any like major shortfalls or shortcomings with this engine, rather than tear this one down and go through all of the steps, I'd like to have one that's ready to go, so that we can just swap that in and if possible do back-to-back testing at some point. I don't know, but we have to get to that point. I do have another engine for this car, but it's not so much a different engine. It's like the next step in this one, and I'm just going ahead with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like pre-preparation. David Leonard. Hi, David. Is it just me or my little phone, but the valve train looks like it's not getting much, if any, lubrication? There's a restrictor in the oil passage that goes to the top end, which is a common thing. It's definitely not starved from oil up there, but it is restricted. Tarxes. I murdered your name, brother. I'm so sorry. But I know you comment all the time. I just never had to pronounce it. It happens, right? Wasn't this running strong enough last year to pile the oil at the back of the crank, at the back, and cause an oil problem? Yes, it certainly was, and that is one of the perplexing things about this, because we did stack oil and did spin a bearing. When we last ran the car, the last time it was at the track, the Slanted Nationals. Was it the Slanted Nationals? It was over a year ago. It's about a year and a half ago now. And that's exactly what happened. The car left like a slug, like nothing on the initial hit, and it got out 30 feet, 40 feet, or thereabouts, and then started pulling really hard. And then it tapered off again. So yeah, at one point we did have an oil starvation problem with it. At one point it did run a lot harder than it's running right now, but I don't know what happened. And so that's why I'm trying to piece through all of this mystery. PLL Inc. PLLINC. I've had a bad experience with that Axel supercoil before and never used them anymore. I've been using them literally since the 70s. And yeah, I've had one or two of them go dead on me. This one I tested. I took a regular small block distributor, I chucked it up in a drill, hooked up the whole system with the battery, and ran it on the drill for, I don't know, a good 15 minutes. And it throws a good solid like inch and a half spark, you know, snap. So I think this is okay. I think it's okay. Willie's Hot Rods. Oh, okay. I shouldn't even read ones like this, but I'm going to. Willie's Hot Rods. Not only is making power and making a slant a 6 fast hard, but in the grand scheme of things, it's dumb. For the same cost involved, a 318, 360, or even a motorhome 440 would be what, seconds faster in the quarter? For the same money, similar effort, you don't have to deal with having a 6-cylinder. Willie's Hot Rods. First off, take Hot Rods out of your name. You're just going to be Willie, because you obviously don't understand the concept of Hot Rods, Willie. I have big blocks everywhere. There's a whole yellow big block with nitrous just sitting on a stand over there. There's a small block over there. I've got stuff all over the place that I can throw in this car. And yes, it would instantly go fast. You know, duh. That's not the point. The point is, this is one of my hot rods, and this hot rod has a Slant 6. And I want to see what I can do with a Slant 6. That's a naturally aspirated Slant 6. Yeah, I could throw nitrous at it, but then it's not really a Slant 6 anymore. It's a nitrous burner. You know, I can put a turbocharger on it, but it's not really a Slant 6 anymore. It's a turbo Slant 6. I want just to see what I can get out of the Slant 6. All by its lonesome. How much power can we make it? How fast can we go in this car? Willie's Hot Rods. Zeprat Jernot. You guys have some names. Zeprat, I'm not even going to try the last name. How to spark? It's pretty hot as it is. The Whitetail Ranger, I thought you were having ignition issues, and that is why it was pulling stumps down the track, but what the heck do I know? Well, you're right, it's having ignition issues, there's no question about it. Now, it may have carburetor issues or jetting issues on top of that, but I won't know if it has jetting issues until the engine actually pulls past like 4,500 RPM. It gets to the higher RPM and it starts to work, then we'll know if it's jetted correctly. But for right now, it's an ignition issue. There's no question in my mind. Michael Lewis, if you're having problems with the ballast resistor heating up during warm-up, why don't you have one for when it's warm that you can switch to? The double ballast resistor is something that I threw in there only because I have always used these coils in cars that have a charging system. So the difference is a car with a charging system is going to charge around 13.8 on average, and a car running off just the battery is going to be 12 volts. So we don't need the second ballast resistor on here. It's kind of redundant. I put it on there just out of habit and not really thinking about it, but afterwards, yeah, we only need the one. Kevin McGuire, if you start eating up your 904 torque flight when your Slant 6 starts making power, buy one from a Vanner pickup. They use 4 discs in both clutch packs, Valiants and Darts. This car only weighs 2,100 pounds, and that engine is never, on its best days, never going to make more than 250 horsepower, right? 260, like that. There's no danger of burning up just even the lightest duty torque flight in this thing. Okay. Rick Maynard, have you thought about running a bypass switch to one of the ballast resistors? That way you can warm up the car with both and run the car with one. Yeah, that's a possibility, but honestly, what I should have done was really completely warmed up the car before I pulled into the staging lanes. It was relatively cool. Started the car, pulled it up to the lanes, and then I just let it sit and idle. And it was the same thing. There was about an hour between 45 minutes to an hour between the first pass and the second pass, and I did exactly the same thing. I let the car sit in the pits. Everything got cold. The track is downhill, so I more or less coasted to the staging lanes. I sat there and I looked at the temperature gauge and I says, well, it's completely like there's nobody home. I better warm this thing up. So I sat there for a good long while with the engine idling to get the temperature up. This thing runs cold. I mean, it really doesn't want to build any heat, which is something I'm going to have to address at some point soon. But it sat and idled for a very long time. And that's when ballast resistors do their thing. When at low speed, that's when they get hot and start pulling voltage away from the coil. And they don't just cool off instantly. It's a ceramic thing, and it'll retain the heat for a while. And I'm thinking that had a definite bearing on what happened. But again, see, I should have warmed the car up before I brought it to the staging lanes. So if I had done that, if I had warmed the car up and the engine had temperature and the intake manifold had temperature in it, and then I had gotten to the staging lanes, I should have been able to just sit there and there would be enough radiant heat in the engine to keep everything happy, and then I could just start it when the lane moves and move around, and I wouldn't have had that problem. So I think half of the issue is that, because I have run this car out here, and it's night and day. So when we've run the car out here, I'll warm it up here in the shop, and then I'll pull the plugs, I'll look at the plugs, I'll check whatever I'm going to check, and then like if Kathy's going to film or whatever, wait till she gets her camera and so on and so forth. So during that time, the engine stays warm. The engine, there's a lot of radiant heat from the block and the head and everything, so the engine stays warm, but it would be giving the ballast resistors enough time to cool off. So that from that point, I'll start it, pull that in the parking lot, and then hammer it. Does that make any sense? So the routine was different. Paul Hare, having a favorite condenser from the 60s seems weird. It would, right? But it is my favorite condenser. It doesn't have a wire, okay? It has like a copper strap. So it's like, yeah, it's my favorite condenser. I actually value that condenser more than most of the whole cars that I have. I know it sounds crazy. I'm nuts, I'm not exaggerating that either. I need coffee. Hang on, guys. Bob Jacquith. Hi Tony, you may have already checked this. In my travels, I've come across a fairly rare occurrence. The low tension wire that connects the points to the coil post sometimes has internal corrosion or it's new. It's a new wire. But that is a good suggestion, Bob. But no, it is a new wire. Professor Gins, one of my nitro compadres. When I read plugs, I look for 3 rings of heat, meaning, yes, I know, I did the same thing you do. Yeah, 3 rings of heat, but that's on a nitro motor. You don't see it on your plugs, let me know. Yeah, no, Gins, it doesn't make any heat, it doesn't make any power. I mean, it just flat lines. I'm lucky if it's making like 80 horsepower right now. It's apples and oranges. You can't go by that. ER cost 60. Just plug in the OBD2 Bluetooth scanner code. Read it will fix itself. This is OBD3. Yeah. Like the cutaway view of the distributor. Hey, you guys working on your cars, that's actually not a bad idea for you. It's something I should have done as a video a long time ago, but it didn't occur to me. Yeah, cut a distributor cap in half or cut a third of it off and actually check and see what the phasing is. And especially the relationship between the tang on the rotor and the button in the cap. Because on this one, and it's all Chryslers like this. So the rotor tang, okay, that comes in contact with the post, sits like this when you put the cap is off, but when you put the cap on it, it actually goes like this. And the end of it points down to the rotor, and it's only maybe 1/8 of an inch different distance. And you can actually see on the rotor, you look at any rotor from a Chrysler distributor that has like more than 10, 20,000 miles on it, and you will literally see the burn marks that correspond with the end of that tang pointing down. It's a flaw that's just built, it's just a design flaw. And it's always been that way. So on a Chrysler distributor, on the rotor, right, you take the rotor and you bend the tang up a little bit. So when you bend the tang up a little bit, when the cap comes down and pushes it in position, instead of the tang being down like this, it faces straight across like that. And it increases the distance between the tang and the rotor. Now, that's important because especially with like a high voltage ignition, you got like a 40,000 volt coil, you end up with pockets of ionized air inside the distributor, and that ionized air will conduct electricity. And that's why you see those burn marks on the rotor. If there's enough of it, it'll actually short to ground like that. So definitely doing a cutaway distributor like a distributor cap like I've got there is not a bad idea for you to do on your own car. Okay. Kyle Perkins. Probably nothing to do with overall power output, but I would do one step up on the plug heat range. First thread and a half of the plug. Yes, Kyle, we're not making enough power right now to get any sort of accurate read on the plugs. There's no heat. If there's no power, there's no heat. So that's a tuning aspect. See, what you guys are talking about as far as like making changes and looking for heat and everything is completely, totally valid. But you have to get to the point where the car is repeatable and consistent before you can, those changes and those fine tuning things will make a difference. At this point, it doesn't matter what spark plug is in there. There's a fault, there's a flaw that's keeping it from climbing into the RPM range where it's going to make power. So yes, all of those suggestions for heat range and so on and so forth, they're great. Including somebody said about side gapping plugs. All of those things are valid and they're good, but not yet. We have to take those steps, and the first step is to keep things as simple as possible, as stock as possible, and find the problem. Once we found the problem, then we can start improving. Steve McGinnis, I don't think you're utilizing the torque from the engine. The stall is too high. As soon as you hit the gas, your torque's at 4,000 RPM. I watched an older vid from you showcasing guy with a fast Slant use a 2,700 RPM stall. When the engine, see, here's what's happening. We have like an RPM power ceiling with this thing that happens to coincide with about where the converter comes in, 4,000, 4,500. It's not pulling into the range that it's supposed to. So once you can't make a judgment if the converter is good or bad, if it's in the right range or the right style or anything like that, until the engine actually makes power. So here's how you know that that's not, the converter itself is not the issue. Past where the converter engages, let's say 20 feet down the track, 100 feet down the track, it's not pulling. The motor isn't revving. So you see what I'm saying? If it was a converter issue, if the converter was too high, yes, that would definitely affect your 60-foot times. It would affect the off starting line performance. But at some point, the motor goes past 5,000, goes to 6,000 RPM. The converter is no longer an issue. So it doesn't matter what converter is in it right now, because it won't pull into any RPM beyond what the converter is capable of. If it was a 2,700 RPM converter in there, let's say it would pull to 3,000 or 3,500, it probably wouldn't pull faster than that. There's a problem, and it's the problem that I'm trying to sort out, not tuning. That's not saying that the converter in here is optimal, but I think that it is. We'll find out. My coffee's getting cold. No, I should be showing the logo on that, right? Okay. Joe, board output 3D3 pistons. Spanky Ham, I wonder if there's too much timing at the top end or not enough, and also wondering if the points are floating in high RPM or if the condenser is falling over. Okay, the timing is locked out at, I've got it set at 30 degrees. So it's not that there's too much or too little in anywhere, it's just a flat 30 degrees. Maybe it would like 28, maybe it would like 32. Slants have a small bore, and so they work best with you don't need as much ignition lead, because the flame front doesn't have to cover a lot of real estate going this way, just this way. So where, let's say, a 4.5 inch bore motor wants 36, 38 degrees of lead to be optimized, a 3.4 inch bore motor only wants 28 or 30. So this is locked out at 30. Also wondering if the points are floating at high RPM, or well, it never reached a high enough RPM for the points to float. And the spring tension felt good on them. I used the Eklund points on there, and I put another set on just in case, right? I swapped them out. There was nothing wrong with the points. They didn't have any marks or pitting or any craziness like that. And the spring tension felt good. The rubric block was good. I did make a change to the point gap. The range for Slant 6 is between 17 and 23 thousandths. I had it at 23 and I brought it back to 17. So that would help if it's a points related higher RPM issue, not float, then bringing the gap back would help higher RPM performance. That might, see what I'm thinking is, honestly, I think it's a few small things that just added up to make for one bad experience. Mr. Dimmons, don't mean to be critical, but what happened to changing, fixing one thing at a time so one can isolate the real problem? Messing with all the ignition components at once looks like a good way of not finding. Well, no, I mean, it's impractical. So I should check the points and then take it to the track and make a run. I should do the condenser and then take it to the track and make a run. That's kind of redundant. I'm not making changes per se. I'm going through and I'm finding flaws and just making sure that every step, everything in the loop is good. Making sure little plugs are firing correctly. Making sure little wires have continuity. Making sure that the phasing is right. I'm not making changes. I'm just blueprinting. I'm going through. I'm not adding any parts. I did take the one ballast resistor out, but I'm just refining. I'm not making changes. I mean, I'm with you. And the concept that you're talking about, that'll come later on, where once the car, so the car starts making passes and it goes 1198, let's say. You know, now you make a small change here and you see if the car goes 1196 or 1195. You see what I'm saying? That's where, but right now I have a problem and I'm trying to fix the problem. I'm trying to identify the problem first. Okay. Coda improvements, I like your dedication to this. I'm dedicated to it. Ronnie B, a change in tire diameter up or down is an easy way to see how gear change would react. And I agree, and I actually have a pair of shorter, excuse me, I have a pair of shorter slicks sitting right there to put on this car for when that time comes. But right now, we're nowhere near there. I can't judge, okay, I can't judge gear ratio, tire diameter, converter. All I can do is guess at those things until the car makes consistent runs. And then you could say, you could look at a time slip and you can compare things and you say, oh, okay, it did A and B, so I have to change C. We're not there yet. The car has a problem. Going to taller or shorter tires or taller or shorter gears will not fix this problem. Do you see what I'm saying? So just, I'm not saying you're wrong, but it doesn't apply to the stage that we're at right now. Sawbones, is there a line lock on it? Does it just break standard? In my life, I have never owned a line lock. I'm one of those people, if I won't add anything to a car unless it's absolutely necessary. An automatic car never needs a line lock, especially if it's got drum brakes. It's got drum brakes. So you just have to just light pressure on the pedal and the car stays still. Disc brakes, you got to give a lot of effort for the car to stand still, so a line lock could help you there. But yeah, I grew up with 4-speed cars doing burnouts with no line lock. It's that quick clutch brake pedal, you know, right? I mastered that when I was like 16, and I've been doing it ever since. Greg, Pat can't have too much converter, 4500 stall for that sits on her. Sounds like a lot of converter to me, Uncle Tony. Either I have some really twisted settings. Greg, I don't know what you're saying. I think the 45 will work if the engine pulls to 6,000, which is what I expect it to do. If the motor goes to 6,000, then the 4500 will get this load moving good and hard. And another reason why I went with what would appear to be a higher than should be torque converter is because the car weighs 2,100, actually just under 2,100 pounds, minus me. And it has everything, has very low rolling resistance. So it's got a 7.25 rear. It's got everything in the car is maximized to reduce parasitic loss, right? Rolling resistance, parasitic loss. And it has a very light weight. So unless the engine has enough reaction to slam into the converter and work the converter, you see what I'm saying? I need a converter that's loose enough to let the motor come up into its power range before it really moves the car. Any tighter of a converter, as I hit it, it'll want to move the car. You see what I'm saying? Does that make any sense? The lighter the car, the lower the power, the lighter the car, the higher stall or looser converter you need to get the motor up into its power band before it starts to move the car, because you don't have the car acting as resistance against the converter. Okay. I need my coffee, guys. I went on this stuff. That almost went down the wrong pipe. That would have been a viral moment. I gotta tell you, that would have been great, because I would just quaffed the coffee all over the room. Okay. Mick Peace. Can the carb suck the air out of the hood scoop? I know the VW Samba has that problem, too little air going through the carb, and some older Mercs was known to hold back. No, it's fine. The airflow through, it's got a snorkel scoop. The velocity has a velocity stack and a K&N stub stack in the center of it, and there's absolutely no restriction of air getting to the carb. CCPG Mike. Watch original video. I thought it was ignition related from the start. Seems to me like above a certain RPM, system was breaking down and weakening the spark. Yes. 11-to-1 compression ratio will snuff out a weak spark. Yes. And that's why I'm saying, you know, let's see. Primary voltage, second resistor, etc. I'm no electrical engineer, but I know coils can be designed for either fast voltage recovery or high RPM, or lower recovery rate but more amps per fire for longer duration spark at modest RPM. Mike, I think you're dead on with your assessment of that. I mean, like okay, we're right here. It's getting cold, see, so I have to drink it fast before it's like, you know, I'm one of those people, when something reaches room temperature, it's dead, and I don't want my coffee to die.
Ornery sent you $5 for coffee.
Thank you so much. Hey, I know it's taboo for me to smoke on these videos. I don't care. My ADD is kicking in. And I'm only about a third of the way through the comments here. Rob Allen, I put the fuel pressure gauge on my dash for my twin side drift BMW engine, and the fuel pressure would drop like a rock under load, down to nothing. Yes, if you have a volume, if there's a restriction, if there's a volume problem, you'll have that. If there's slosh in the tank, you'd have that. This car has a fuel cell with a sump. It has a rear-mounted Holley blue pump, and it has a 3/8 steel line that runs all the way to the front with a nitrous express filter someplace in the middle of the car. Now, one of the telltales when you've got a car like this, when you got a drag car, let's say, and one of the telltales for fuel starvation is so you're staging the car, okay? And while you're staging the car, there's no great fuel demand. So even a mostly restricted fuel system will still fill the carbs. And the same thing with a non-sumped tank. When it's sitting there stationary, the pickup will pick up, the fuel pickup in the tank will fill the carburetor as you're sitting there in the starting line. Now, you give it gas, and what'll happen is the car will jump up and go, and it'll run out hard until it runs out of the fuel in the bowls. At that point, you know it's starving. We actually did a whole video on fuel starvation, and that's what you're talking about here. And in this case, I know that's not the case because when I stop it, nobody home. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't want to move. All right. More parts of everything. What is happening, my psycho elitist brother? Mopar's Everything is like one of my favorite trolls. He's actually a good guy, but he's a troll at the same time. Go figure, right? I don't know why I have to be the one to say this, but you will never have a fast Slant 6 because of you and what your claim to fame is. Cheap and junk. Impossible to be genuinely fast, especially normally aspirated, when you refuse to use high-end parts and/or high-end machine work and port work to make power to enable a combination to excel. Where did I skimp on parts for this thing? The block has been to the machine shop. It's got a custom ground cam, which for the life of me, it's been 2 years and I don't remember what the numbers were on it. I've got to find the cam card, but that's besides the point. I spent the money on all of the parts. It's got all new good parts in it. I don't know where you're getting that from. Need an example, just go back to what the Rustler Valiant did. On this car to go genuinely fast, aftermarket lightweight wheels. I have aftermarket lightweight wheels. Aluminum drum and rollerized trans. At some point, yeah, but we're not there yet. You know, and the difference between a rollerized trans and an aluminum drum is going to be what? Half a tenth? At that end, I'm missing seconds here. So, I mean, like, you know, you're splitting hairs for something that's not time to split hairs for yet. Selected from a dyno session. I would have wasted my time on a dyno session because it would have done the same thing on a dyno as it did at the track. It would have fallen on its face. So now I would have spent all kinds of time and money, hassle, booking a dyno session on an engine that, where do you even find somebody who can put a Slant 6 on a friggin' dyno around here? Ported cylinder head. I ported my heart out on that head. I ported and ported and ported. I welded and ported. Oversized valves. I did stick with the stock size valves because it is such a small bore. One of my plans is to go to an oversized valve, but that's not the issue here. So what you should really be explaining to your viewers is Plan Z is what you get when you use wore out junk parts. And if you want to be fast like Rustler, then you have to grow and spend the money on real parts like a real man. I love you, bro. All right. Anthony, that's the guy's name, not me. It would be cool if Edelbrock came up with a flow-through design cylinder head for the Slant 6. Oh, I agree, and I have a friend who actually has the power to make that happen. Friend, you know who you are. But it would require an overhead cam conversion, so keep that in mind. Bruno Locke, been down this road with a stick shift slant and e-gas Valiant back in the day. Yes, you want big bore, short stroke, but you can't have that. So it's like running a tractor engine. It is. I ran advanced weights with 29 degrees at 4,000 and 34 at 6,000 on Chevron white pump. Nowadays gas Okay, so he's talking about an old school setup that he ran, and yeah, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's had issues getting the slant to go. Michael Baker, honestly, Tony, isn't that where the real fun and challenge lies? The fiddling, the testing, experimenting, the brainstorming, getting so frustrated you want to set the damn thing on fire. Yes, yes, it is, and it's impossible to explain to people. But okay, like during the day when you're here and you're working on it, you get all frustrated and stuff, and it's like, ugh. But then you go home and it's like, now it's time to go to sleep, and you lay in there and you're thinking about all of the things, and it's like, and then you realize, wow, this is actually giving me something to like really focus on. This is giving me something to like, you know, and then you wake up in the morning. The best thing, when you have a problem, I know it's gonna sound counterintuitive to a lot of people. If you're not a mechanic, you're not gonna get it. But when you have a problem like this, and it's, you know, it's a little perplexing. When you wake up in the morning, you're like a rocket, okay? There's no like dilly-dallying or anything like that. You wake up in the morning and you're like, I gotta go attack this problem. I gotta find this problem. And it's like, it becomes like a motivator that kind of sets the tone for everything else you do that day. I know it sounds crazy, but problems like this are actually very good for you. There's the bad stress, stuff that you have no control over that other people and things put on you. And then there's the good stress. And the good stress is situations that you get yourself into and then you have to use your creativity and ingenuity and tenacity to get out of. This is the good stress. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. Okay. Robert Briggs. Robert, I do believe that this was the comment that made me say, I just got to do a video. Robert Briggs. When you welded the advanced weights in the full advanced position, you threw the phasing way off. Now pay attention to this, okay? I'm going to read it again. When you welded the advanced weights in the full advanced position, you threw the phasing way off. By changing the tang, you undid your screw up. You arrived at the same place, just took the long road. Start over, weld the weights in the idle position, and go back to the old tang. And there were 4 people who thumbed that up. They agreed with him. Robert, at 5,000 RPM, right? At 5,000 RPM, what position are those weights in? They're in full advance. At idle and 1,500 RPM, let's just say, they're retracted. At higher RPM, 5,000 or so, they're advanced. And at that point, okay, look at the bottom of a distributor cap, and you'll see that there's a sweep. So the post for the cap is small, and the rotor tang is wide. And the reason for that is because during the swing of the advanced weights, the rotor phasing changes. And that wide tang and the narrow post ensure that during the whole sweep from no advance at all to full advance, everything is still in contact, or everything is still relative. Now, what happened was, with my phasing thing there, is that when I welded the advanced weights, I also removed the vacuum advanced canister, because there's no sense in having a vacuum advanced canister on that distributor. There's not going to be any vacuum advanced, or any advance at all. I made a mistake. What I did was, there's a tang, I showed it on the video, there's a tang on the advanced canister that indexes the distributor cap. Big block, small block, slant 6 all use exactly the same canister. The linkage arm is different, but the canister and the part that screws to the distributor is the same. So big block and small block and slant 6, big block and small block have different rotations. So let's just use that for example. They have different rotations. So the small block is clockwise, the big block is counterclockwise. So what they do is they flip it over. It's the same vacuum advanced canister, but they flip it over. And each one has a tang. So you put the vacuum advanced canister on a distributor, the tang faces up. But now if you wanted to do a reverse rotation, you would take that same vacuum advanced plate, flip it upside down, and it also has a tang. Well, unbeknownst to me, when I cut the tang off, I didn't realize that they're actually phased differently. The one direction rotation, and the other direction rotation actually have the distributor cap phased differently by a small amount. And I used the side of the canister. I cut the side of the canister off that didn't match the rotation of the distributor. And so my phasing was off due to that. Now, here's an interesting thing. The last time I screwed around with the car, when it ran good, I didn't have any tang on there at all. I added the tang afterwards. What I did was, because I didn't have a vacuum, I wanted to get the car running, and I didn't have an old vacuum advanced canister handy to cut that piece off of to make a tang. So I said, I'll just line it up with the clips, right? I'll just center it to the clips, and we'll go from there. And that's what I did, and the car ran really good. Sometime between then and now, I added the tang, and that tang changed the phasing of the cap by just a hair. So now what I just did now was I used the other tang, the other side of the canister. I cut that off, flipped it upside down, put it in there, and then I checked the phasing. So that could very well be where my problem was, and we're going to find out when we. But like I said, when the car ran hard, when it ran hard enough to actually put oil to uncover the sump, it did it with no tang at all on there. Just the cap was just indexed by eye. When I put the tang on there, it changed the index. So there's a very good possibility that that right there was my problem. Okay. Are you, Nate Van Landingham, are you going to get back on the Jeep engine? Yes. I got sidetracked. I'm one guy. I got so many things going on. There are more interesting things that are going on. There are things that get more views that are going on, and there are things that are more pressing. And so right now, yeah, I know I shouldn't have put it off the way I did, but I did. I will get back to it. But I'm a one-man band. You know what I'm saying? I do the best I can, and I also have to answer to the views. I have to do stuff that gets the most views, and that doesn't really get that many views. Doesn't say I'm not going to go back to it, but it's not a priority. Smolton, hi Tony, have you thought about triple carbs? It might be better. It might be, and it might not. The fastest Slant 6s out there run a single 4-barrel intake manifold just like this, and have actually a bigger carburetor. Like the Rusty uses a 750 Edelbrock. It could either be a Carter or Edelbrock. It doesn't matter. It's that style carburetor. So a 750 Edelbrock flows about the same as a 700 Holly or so, and this is a 650. So if anything, I'm just slightly smaller carburetor-wise than the fastest cars. Gary Hatch should take the 383 out of Slaghammer and put it in Plan Z. But then I would just have Slaghammer with a bunch of holes drilled in it. Joe Blow, if you're sure it's ignition related, get a Chrysler electronic distributor wired to a GM HEI module and an epoxy coil. Done. Get rid of all that antiquated junk. Joe Blow. So first off, I have had far more RPM related issues with Chrysler electronic ignitions, and it's textbook. They won't put, when the boxes, some of them are defective, some of them just go bad, some of them are just poorly made, they'll reach a ceiling at like 4,500, 5,000 RPM. And they will not rev past that. It's an issue I've come across time and time and time again. And then your suggestion, Joe Blow, your suggestion literally led to the demise of an engine that I built right before we started doing YouTube. I built a supercharged Slant 6 for a customer, okay? This is with a torque storm. This was the best of everything inside this engine. It had the Molnar rods. It had I forget which pistons they were. Good everything, new everything, machine everything, right? Top of the line stuff. So we built this thing, and I used a stock Chrysler distributor on it. He wanted electronic ignition, so we put electronic ignition in it. He takes the car, he runs it around, everything is fine. He actually uses it to go to and from work for like months, right? This thing, it's in daily traffic. He hammers on it occasionally. Everything is good, everything is fine. Did have some carburetor jetting issues, but I mean, nothing crazy. All right, so fast forward about a year after I finished this car, he calls me up and he tells me that the motor's making a noise. And I'm like, Okay, well, let's take a look at it. So I go to his house, right? And he fires it up, and it's making a racket. It's not knocking, but you can hear there's something clattering around inside the engine. All right, well, I can't imagine what this is. So I pull the spark plugs. And there's signs of detonation, crazy detonation. And this thing, as it's running, right, you give it any gas, it goes, it starts stuttering, going crazy. Just like as if it had a bad condenser, only there's no condenser because it's electronic ignition. I'm like, I can't imagine what the hell is going on here. So I says, let's yank the head. So I yanked the head. And the top of the motor, like I said, detonation like crazy. Everything it looked like it had been like kind of through the, not through the wall where it broke parts, but, so anyway, make a long story short, I cannot figure, I said, did you screw with the timing? He says, no, I never took the distributor out, I left it exactly alone. I says, did you run like some kind of weird gas or fuel additive, anything like that with it? He says, no, it's just been pump gas ever since. I says, and then I noticed that on the fender well of the car, right, to the back there, he had mounted an HEI coil, okay? So I says, I wonder if, and I popped the cap off, and when I popped the cap off, the strap in the rotor had burned away to nothing. It had actually melted back the tang on the rotor, because he used a stock Chrysler or replacement Chrysler rotor with the GM HEI module. So it ends up, he bought this setup off of a guy named Slant 6 Dan, I think his name was, right? Put it on, drove the car for a month or so like that, and the whole time he was driving it, that arc welder, HEI, amplified HEI coil that he was using on there, kept etching away at the end of the strap until it finally burned it away that the spark could freely jump around. So like once that strap reaches a certain point, under certain circumstances, certain RPM and whatnot, the spark is kind of like free to wander, and that's what it did. You get up to like highway speed, and the spark would be like sticking to the bit of the rotor, and then it would go pick, and it would bounce all over the place, and then find its home again. And that destroyed the friggin' motor. It crushed the ring lands on, they pulled the pistons out, and it crushed the ring lands on 2 or 3 cylinders. So that setup that you're talking about right there, I literally experienced myself, literally watched that exact setup that you're talking about destroy a friggin' motor that was built out of nothing but top of the line parts. So yeah, keep the hybrid shit. That was long, I'm sorry. Ed Petrick, just find the mop guy to give you a push on the line and you'll be fine. Mop guy is my good luck charm, right? Chuck Bryant, I know nothing about Slant 6 engines, but I do know about Jeep and Ford 6s. A couple of questions. First, why not put an HEI on it? I just answered that, my friend. Okay, this is long. This is long, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. But Charles Elert II. He wrote this, and he says it's very long, but it's okay. Thanks, Uncle Tony. Good job. As an engineer for GE Power Systems, we would troubleshoot engine issues, well, all issues really, by starting with the problem statement. What are you trying to fix? Then brainstorming by considering everything and making a fishbone diagram, like what you did with all okay. So that's exactly it. You start with the statement. So if the car runs right, the problem or the issue is how do I make it go faster? But you can't think about that until the car runs right. So the first step in troubleshooting is to find the issues. Team Machinator, running no charging system is false economy. Add an alternator cutout for the run if the alternator drag bothers you. Running no ballast resistor is fine for strip-only car. You have no idea how that old condenser works unless you test it electronically. It may work but be totally inadequate for higher revs. Okay, and he goes on with this. It never ran high. It never ran a high enough rev to consider high revs. It was flat. It was dead, and that wasn't the condenser that I put in here now is not the condenser that was in there. I have not tested the condenser that was in there other than to put it in the distributor that I ran, the V8 distributor that I ran up on the drill just to see how that works. So what I did was I took a V8 distributor and I took the points and the condenser that was in here the other night and wired that up with the coil and let it run for about 15 minutes. I just stood there with my hand on the drill. And I varied RPM a little bit to you know, but I watched the spark from that point, that set of points in that condenser, and it was fine. So I doubt there were any issues with that. The converter is a mismatch. Never seen a car stop spinning that way either. Well, that's because the engine reached the converter and wouldn't go any higher. So something's got to give. And instead of the tire spinning, the converter slipped, and it just went back and forth. Peter Kuhn, fuel tank vent. It has a number 6 line for a fuel tank vent at the front of the tank, at the top of the tank, and it goes under the tank. You know, so in other words, it comes out of the top back of the tank, loops around like this, and it goes under the tank, and it's affixed to the frame rail under the tank. And you always want to do that because in the event that you flip the car, somebody hits you, whatever it happens to be, and the car goes upside down, by having the vent come below the level of the tank, if the car is upside down, the fuel can't siphon out of the, I should do a whole video on that because that's an important safety thing. Kelly's my garage, maybe the propeller belt was loose. Back to the running no charging system as false economy. Well, no, you're wrong. It's not false economy. I'm trying to save weight and parasitic loss in every possible way with this car because I'm trying to go fast with a weed whacker. It's a weed whacker, and it's not even a sophisticated weed whacker. So because of that, yeah, that's not a false economy. It's 8 pounds plus the bracketry, plus all of the belt, the parasitic losses from the belt and everything. No, it's not a false economy on this. It would be a false economy on that. It would be a false economy on anything that makes power, but this don't make power. And on its best day, its day of glory when everything comes together and everything is just perfect, it's only going to make about as much power as a stock 340. Think about it. So it's not a false economy. It's actually an important element of making this car work. Headflow Inc. If you can't find better rear gears, the next step is more air pressure and shorter tires. Add air pressure until it spins. Yes, I agree with you, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're going to get there. Greg Fisherman, sounds like you need to hunt up a decent and inexpensive ignition system. I have a decent inexpensive ignition system. I've got lots of decent inexpensive ignition systems. I have it. Don't worry about it. We're good. Okay, Oops, his name is Oops. Thanks for taking us on this ride-on. I like this better than going to the track. I expect you've already got this. The later 904 has a 277 first gear instead of the 245. Yes, and I have one over there that I've got to strip down and do, but I don't want to tear into this transmission until afterwards. When we're going to that next step, after we fix the car, and now we're going to try to go fast, putting the lower gear set in this transmission, or just built in that transmission, is absolutely part of the plan. So you're right about that. Headflow Inc., are you locking the timing in the distributor? Yes. Thumper the sweaty fat guy. I stopped using those super coils way back in the early 90s. They start great, run good driving around, but over 4,500 RPM, I would get strange issues like surging, missing, no power, etc. I stopped using XL stuff entirely in the 90s because I had issues with the wires, HEI coil, and pretty much everything of theirs I tried. I'm not saying the parts are bad or junk, just that I had problems with them running my Pontiacs. The way I tune stuff is different because of where my engines make power. Yeah, I get it, and I've had my run of bad axle stuff too, but I've never had a problem, a problem that I didn't cause. I never had a problem with one of these super coils. The wires themselves, and the solid core wires, nothing can really go wrong with them. So it's like these are very basic, simple parts. But I get you being gun shy of. Actually, honestly, The stock HEI stuff, if you just went to the auto parts store and you just ordered a stock cap, stock HEI coil, stock wires that go with the HEI stuff, you're not absolutely not going to do any better if you buy the Axle stuff. Think about it. Karen Severis, you got to get another lightweight rear Tri-5 Chevy, really? With some 513 gears. After that, I would think about 2 to 3 side drifts. Karen, I definitely wouldn't put a Tri-5 Chevy in it. I have 8 3/4. I've got plenty of 8 3/4. I've got plenty of 8 3/4 gear sets. But this rear is the lightest rear I could possibly put in this car. It has the skinniest axles. It has the smallest carrier. It has the least amount of rolling resistance. With the weight of this car and the power that it's going to make, there is no way it will ever hurt the 7 1/4 in there. And there's going to be, like, so to use the rear end that you're talking about, the Tri-5 Chevy rear, and 8 3/4 is very similar, so it doesn't make any difference. You're talking about adding 75 pounds to the back of the car and a significant amount of parasitic loss. So in a last resort, if I get to the point where the 410 gear is the bottleneck, I can't get past it, and I can't find a deeper set, because these deeper sets were made, I just can't find one now. If I ever do get to that point, then I would consider putting, actually an 8 1/4 might be a better choice, because the 8 1/4 has a slightly taller pinion than the 8 3/4, so it takes less power to turn. So yeah, I have rear end options, and I actually have the stuff I would need to make the swap now, but I'm determined on trying to make this 7 1/4 work. Chris Harper put the alternator back on and add an MSD ignition, which works off the point. I don't need an MSD. I'm not having any problem with the thing misfiring, bag or loading plugs, or doing anything unusual at lower RPM. Keep in mind that the MSD it's only an MSD, multiple spark discharge, to about 3,500 RPM. I don't have that problem. I don't have a fat idle. I'm not loading plugs. I'm none of those problems. So there's no problem that this car is doing right now that an MSD would fix. And then above the 3,500, 4,000 RPM, then the MSD is just an amplifier, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's providing a hotter spark, but I don't need a hotter spark. I'm not fouling the plugs as it is, and there's not enough cylinder pressure. I'm not boosting this. I'm not running nitrous. This is normally aspirated. There isn't enough cylinder pressure to require, and fuel going through it, to require anything hotter than just, I tell you, I mean, God's honest truth, a dead stock coil would probably be just fine. A 20,000 volt, 20,000 volt stock Chrysler coil would probably be all this thing needs to run. So definitely do not need an MSD. Gilbert Washburn, you need a new condenser. That one from the 60s, this week they go bad. They were out. They leak all of this capacitor. Capacitors are filling. It's fine. Gilbert, the condenser I have there is fine. It's like one of my oldest living relatives. I've had it and everything. Nothing will ever go wrong with it. Erica MTB, I think it's running on 5 cylinders. The telltale is where there's a piston on the table. Erica, that's not one of the pistons from this engine. No, I should have made that clear. It's a piston from a different engine. No, all 6 were in here. Greg Pratt, are you running a power valve or are you blocked off? Currently it's blocked off, and I think that's a problem. I did not go up on the jet sizes the way I should have. So it's blocked, and I have like 66s or 68s, and really should be in the 70s, like middle 70s. Now I don't have a power valve in it because I'm totally not concerned with mid-range or anything like that. Part throttle. I'm only concerned with idle and flat foot. Only 2 positions I care about. So I don't really need a power valve in there. It'll never be driven on the street or anything like that. But I should have gone bigger on the main jets. But I can't get an accurate jet reading until I have the thing running the way it's supposed to, and then I can see what it needs. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Jens Olson, you said you were running 93 octane, but does it have ethanol in it? Yes. If it has ethanol, it will affect how the fuel burns when ignited. Ethanol has less energy. I know, bro, I know, but I use ethanol gas. Everything I own is intended to run on ethanol gas because I don't want to have to go find non-ethanol gas. See what I'm saying? So all of the stations in my immediate area have ethanol gas. All of the stations in our viewers' immediate areas all have ethanol gas. And so I tune and I operate everything I own on ethanol gas, including Bottle Rocket. Everything gets ethanol gas. Greg Pratt. Oh, Greg, you're in there a lot. If it's only topping out at 4,800 and you got a 4,000 stall, you got too much style, sounds like to me. My 2 cents again. GT speech up. Yeah, the motor will work, when the motor operates correctly, it will go higher than the stall of the converter. Here's a good one. Donald Gilbreth. I've had distributor bushings wear just enough to cause a wobble, big enough to move the shaft, enough to make the spark have to travel too far. Okay, yeah, no, the bushings are fine. When I did that distributor, when I took that one apart to weld the weights and all of that, I had like 5 distributors to choose from. I took all of them apart, and the one with the best bushings, the least amount of play, is the one that I used. So no, there's no play. Actually, I just checked that, and there's 1,000th of an inch. So if I check the point gap on one side, right? Check the point gap, and then I pull the shaft all the way over, I pick up 1,000th of an inch in point gap, and that's not enough. 1,000th of an inch variation is not enough to cause the issue that we've had here. But no, the bushings are definitely good in that distributor. Let's see. Michael Strafello, does it have dwell change when you rev it up? No. No, I need distributor bushings. No, the dwell stays steady. Indiana Sun, the joy of tuning an analog car using the butt dyno. I wouldn't have it any other way. I suggest Moon Eye stickers and a cherry bomb muffler. Stovebolt 56, did you degree the camshaft during the build? I quickly scanned the channel. Yes, it's up 4 degrees. It's advanced 4, not retarded 4. Okay, so advancing the cam will increase bottom end power. Retarding it will increase top end power. But that's not the problem. If the engine just flat ran out of steam or wasn't pulling when it was loaded, then I'd say, yeah, maybe I need to back the cam up and pick up power. But it wasn't. See, it actually had a feel to it. It had like a staticky, surgy kind of feel when it was under load, and a camshaft will not give you that. The ignition will give you that. But it is possible at some point I do end up retarding the camshaft. But first we got to get the car A to B smoothly, cleanly. Craig Chido, it's amazing that with today's engineering machining tech, they can't make a set of customer gears cheap. I called the manufacturers to see if they can make 355 gears for a 10.5-inch 14-bolt GM axle. They need to buy at least 1,000. Yep, that's exactly the number I got because I contacted. I forgot who I contacted, and I was exactly that. I was like, look, what would it take to get a set of gears going? And I figured, well, I'll just offer gears, right? And no, it's it. They want 1,000 sets. You get minimum order of 1,000 sets, and they'll do it for you. And you can't blame them. It's not like they could just whip it up. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot to it. Greg Pratt, again, one more thing, Tony, air pressure for the tires. I haven't had any issues before. My own small horsepower applications, when you leave the line instead of... No, we're not there yet, Greg. We're not there yet. That's the one thing. A lot of you guys are... you're putting the cart before the horse. You're thinking too far ahead. You know, you're a lot of suggestions you're making, they're valid suggestions, but not until the car actually runs cleanly and smoothly. Then we go from there. First, we have to overcome the problems. Then we can fine-tune. Nitrous and bias plies, what are you thinking that engine makes for horsepower? like nothing, bro. Like nothing. Please. Johnny Stevens, not that it's a problem, but have you blueprinted the plugs, temperature, reach, side gap, or cut the grounding strap? Not yet, because you don't know. So right now I'm experiencing an issue with it. if, let's say I had, quote, blueprinted the plugs, which is something I will do. If I had blueprinted the plugs, now I have to second guess myself and say, well, did I damage a center, when I side gapped, did I damage the center electrode? Because that happens. If you clip it, I've actually had the ceramic break out from the center. You don't realize until you turn the spark plug upside down. If it was fouling plugs, if it was doing anything unusual to the plugs, you have to say, well, is it something I did to the spark plugs? But if I just take them out of the box at this stage of the game and throw them in there, then through the process of elimination, I know that unless it's just a dead plug, I know that it's nothing I did with the plugs. So after you've established a baseline, that's when you do the tuning. That's when the tuning happens. And then you start playing with side gapping and different heat ranges and so on and so forth. But for right now, we just needed to just go down the track. It doesn't even have to go fast. It just has to go okay. All right. This is actually longer than I thought it was. Steven, check the crankshaft pull. They can cause an issue also. I don't know what you mean by that. Charles Schultz, global warming. That's not warming anything. Craig Chido, put a heat sink and the resistors, the ones from the computer guts might work. The ballast resistors on this car literally, okay, I gotta go back about 3 inches, right, from where I am right now, but they literally mount, the ballast resistors in the coil mount to the front frame rail ahead of the engine, between the engine and the radiator. And the ballast resistors are actually, when everything is together, the ballast resistors are actually hanging out in the wind that goes right here. So yeah, I don't need it. I don't a little, the computer fan definitely won't outdo the all of that. Robert Beck, I bought a new Slant Duster in '73. I love the car, wish I still had it, but it was obvious the engine was designed by great Chrysler engineers to be a people mover, boat engine, sawmill. Yes, I know. Laurel Flynn, I think you hit the nail on the head with the ignition voltage. I had a similar problem with an old Ford I drive regularly. Started good cold with choke, but wound over a bit of time before it fired when warm. I discovered a bad connection that allowed enough power to the starter, but not enough to the coil. I trust it'll be warming the engine as you did with the track before you smoke them up. Yeah, no, Laurel, I think it was a couple of issues all adding up, and that low voltage, I believe, is it. KVAC 53. As far as the only gear available right now is a 410, is there any benefit to running one and shorter slicks? I want to know your answer myself. Yes, there will be, but not yet. I don't know yet because the car doesn't run yet. When the car runs, it gets on a track A to B, and it does it a few times, and it does it, let's say, in a faster zone. Because right now you can literally get out and run alongside this car and maybe beat it to the 60-foot clock. So first we've got to get it to where there's no issues, and then we can play with slick diameter and width and height and tire pressure and all of these things that you guys are mentioning. These are all good things. You're all throwing valid suggestions, but those suggestions are premature to where we are with this car now. Does that make any sense? Michael Twaits, I knew it. You just fixed it, UTG. Absolutely, the phase was out. And along with the more precise alignment, full energy is there. Sounded like it was out, and you, Guru, thank you, found it, sir. Yeah, Michael, yeah, I think that was a big part of it. I honestly think that was a big part of it. Bobby Radcliffe, maybe not ignition, sounds like jetting and soot on the plug. There is soot on the bottom of the plug, but that's only because I never bother cleaning them off. I'll clean, okay. So those plugs have been bouncing around for a long time. And usually I'll clean them off with the torch, and I didn't. And I used those, and they were in something else. I forget what they were. And at some point it was overflowing the carburetor, and it carboned up that section of it. Now, after I straightened it out, I kept those plugs in the engine, drove it around a while, and the ceramics cleaned up. So once the ceramics cleaned up, I was like, okay, good. This will be fine. I never bothered to clean the carbon from around the bottom of them. clutch kicker. Didn't see what you dropped, but if something's missing, it's on the floor next to the red bike tank. I'll take a look. Stephen Machurik, maybe air stacking due to overlap and timing. I'm not sure what you mean by air stacking, my friend. Werewolf Pig, great name, I love that. I got no idea how to make this thing runs fast, but there are a couple of Finnish lunatics that make these things scream. All we had were 904 automatics and a lot of bolt action gearboxes. All I can remember is, okay, he's just talking about the stuff that they played around with back in the day. Oh, he's from Soviet Finland. Around the world, man. It's like, YouTube is great like that. Mike W. wants to know if I can get my hands on a Slant 6 Magneto. No such thing, man. They never made them for Slant, or if they did make them, none of the popular manufacturers like Vertex or Scintilla or Mallory, none that I know of ever made a Magneto, Joe Hunt, for the Slant 6. It's possible that they're out there, but I've never seen one and I've never come across one. I would definitely want, if I came across one and the price was reasonable, I would definitely be interested in that. Okay. Ricky Nelson put a 3500 converter in it and let the power get to the tranny. Let me make power first. Territory, Uncle Tony, please check while idling with misting spray bottle that your wires aren't jumping spark to the block. No, the wires on this engine, if you've ever seen them, I've got them routed so neatly and so perfectly they don't come in contact with anything around them. And they were new wires, they're solid core wires. I've had them, they've been around for a few years now. But no, there's no chance of any of them arcing off to anything else. Specifically, when I run my plug wires, I pay a lot of attention to that, and it's definitely not an issue. It's either going to work or it ain't garage. So if you want more first gearing for your launch, you can swap in a 700R4 that has a 306. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because I do not crossbreed. There are so many better choices for transmissions, so many better choices for rear ends, so many better choices for everything, but it's against my religion to crossbreed. So yeah, I'm not arguing that would definitely be a much better thing to have, but it's got to be Mopar. It has to match the car. You know, it's just me. It's just the way I am. I'm a psychotic purist. I work with a lot of stuff that should have been swept to the dustbin of the dumpster of history decades ago, but it's what came on these things, and it's what I work with. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's me, right? So yeah, I do appreciate the suggestion. Tom Storm, without a visible fuel gauge, how do you know it's holding 6 psi of fuel pressure? Because of the nature of the fuel system, it's definitely not subjected to slosh or starvation or anything like that, because it's got a tank, it's got a cell with a sump, and the way it's plumbed, I know that it's getting, if it's reading 7 psi at idle, it's going to be reading 7 psi a couple hundred feet down, well, maybe not a couple hundred feet, but at least 100 feet down the track. I'm not experiencing fuel starvation as I would with, that's definitely not it. Kyle Greenhow, I'm no expert, but I wonder if the converter should be slightly lower RPMs. It is, yes, it's possible, but don't know yet. Ricky Nelson, get rid of on points and go electronics. No. Tom Strum, if you can pull an inch and a half spark length between dizzy cap power terminals 1 through 6 spark plug wire and your ignition is okay. Okay. Zero. The quest for perfection. The way of the gearhead monk. Thank you, Zero. Takio Ishii, are you familiar? Zero, we were just talking about this with Kathy yesterday, right? Takio Ishii, he's a Japanese yodeler. Did a bunch of videos, but one of them was called Chicken Attack. I thought of you. It's the most punk rock thing you'll ever see in your life. Dried brain freeze. $12.99 will require a bottle, and you're a Slant lover. Nah, I can do it without. Other people have done it without. I'm going to do it without. Broken tool garage, good job, directionally correct steps, at least, thank you, sir. Tony leveling, ignition timing, no, it's locked out at 30 degrees, it's fine. YT Watcher, now you've gone and done it, open Pandora's distributor. Yeah, right, that's right, I love that. Pandora's distributor. Brian Juff's weight savings, remove ballast resistor, gotta be worth 2/10 of a second. Okay. James is saying, I was thinking not enough resistance in the coil, glad you confirmed it. Mike Kalfakis, I watched the run video. My suggestion is to avoid the water and burnout. With a car like this, why would you need a burnout to get traction? This car should have, if it made power, if it was running correctly at the weight of this car, yeah, it would need a burnout. There's no question it doesn't need a crazy big burnout, but it does need a burnout to at least clean the tires. Again, all of those suggestions are good for after the car is running and after we've established a baseline, but not yet. And like I keep saying, you guys are putting the cart before the horse. You're not realizing that there's an issue that has to be worked through first before you get to all of these other procedural things. All right.
So tell them why you're reading questions that aren't theirs. You're reading questions from the
I'm reading questions
video.
from the video because I did the video, I posted it. A couple hours later, I go and I check the comments, and it was like all these comments, and like I wanted to respond to a lot of them, and it was just I'm going to literally spend the rest of the night going through. And if you answer one, you kind of have to answer all of them, and it's just like I'm just going to do a live. I'm just going to do a live.
Okay, so all right. Well, you're on like an hour and a half.
That's okay. We have questions from people that are there. Let's.
Mark just sent you $10. Love your channel.
Thank you.
Screw the points. Bring the car up to early 70s and grab an electronic setup from the pick and pull.
I have at least 3 electronic distributors. There's one on the shelf at the house, and there's 2 over there on the shelf. I've got them. I've got every box you can. I've got a chrome one. I've got a couple of orange ones. I got a couple of the regular, the stock black ones. I have all that stuff. I choose to use this for simplicity's sake, because I'm a simplicity freak, and it's much easier to diagnose a problem, simpler and quicker, easier to diagnose and fix a problem with the points as it would be than it is with the electronic ignition. Here I only have 2 items in the loop that can give me a problem generating spark, the points and the condenser, where when you add an electronic ignition, it increases the places that you need to troubleshoot. There's no need for it. Plus, there's no RPM to this engine. There's no way, even on its best day, it won't spin higher than 5,800, 6,000 RPM, big power up there. So it's a decent set of points. I will not experience any type of float at that RPM.
Okay. Jay Mankey sent you $19.99 earlier.
Thank you.
Said they don't expect too much from you.
They don't expect too much
No.
from me. I'm like the special kid.
Okay, so what other comments did you have to read from there? Was there anything else, or you good?
I
You think you're
stopped.
good?
I think from that point on, they're kind
They're
of
probably not
redundant.
even gonna watch this.
I hope that they do. We're going to put this up as a video. Usually the lives we leave as lives so that they don't show up in a regular search, but we're going to leave this as a video so that anybody who I did
We're gonna
respond
put
to.
it up as a video.
Yeah, we'll put this up as a video.
I should edit it a little bit.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe you can take out the part where I run to the bathroom.
Or when I run away because I had a tickle in my throat.
You had a tickle in your throat.
Yeah, and I didn't have my drink here.
We're only human.
I know. Sometimes I get that bad tickle.
I know.
Look for ghost chickens in the sky.
Always.
Okay.
I'm always looking for ghost chickens.
Rusty says UT is an American treasure.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Does anybody have any questions directly related to this car? Because I want to try to keep, this isn't like one of our regular lives. This is,
Wayne Ferguson wants to know, have you determined that spark was the issue on Z?
well, I haven't put it back together again yet, but I did find enough things. Like I said, that second resistor shouldn't have been in there. I didn't really think it through when I put it together. I just did it out of like, this is how I've always done it. I didn't really think about it. The second resistor, I think for sure is an issue. The phasing was definitely an issue. And that's something like I said, the difference between when the car ran good, because at one point, it was dead on the hit, pulled like crazy, and then just kind of like leveled off. Well, at that point, I had no indexing tang on it at all. And, oh, you know what? I'll tell you what. I'm gonna go I'll be right back. Because I talked about the tang of the distributor.
I'm sorry, Lout.
Oh, great, I don't have.
Did you find it?
Oh.
Okay.
So this is a stock Slant 6 distributor. Can you, hold?
Yeah, I'm here.
No, put that there and just tell me
Okay.
higher or lower.
Lower, a little lower, a little higher.
A little higher?
All right.
Okay.
What would be shown?
So this is a stock Slant 6 distributor.
Okay.
Okay? And this vacuum canister is the same one that they use on big block, small block, and Slant 6. The difference is the arm, right? So this is the same, and this plate is the same. And the arm is different. This right here,
Can't see it.
this tang,
Okay.
indexes the cap for distributor rotation one way. Now for distributor rotation the other way, this is rotated. And when this is rotated, this tang is now used. The one that's facing the bottom. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so what I found is that this tang and this tang index differently. They move the cap slightly. I didn't know that. So when the car ran good, I had the cap on it, and I just aligned it by eye with the hold downs, and it worked good. I started having a problem after I added the tang. When I added the tang, now I don't know, I can't tell you that was directly the problem, but it's got to be more than just a coincidence that it ran fine without the tang than it did with the tang. So I think that could have been a big part of it.
So, BB 400 Dart says, listen, if you have phasing off, you would have cylinder misfires because the cylinders would be mixed up. You didn't have that. You got a lack of power. That is weak spark.
Okay, well, what you're saying is true if it's really off. But if it's just slightly off, not necessarily.
Greg McDonald says, what about a bad or incorrect accelerator pump?
No.
Shot.
It's a double. That would only affect that. That would have nothing to do with as the car continues down the track. That would only affect the hit.
Curious of the mile per hour on the runs?
Oh, like 66 miles an hour. It was like, you could like just get out and run alongside of it. It was like one of the longest trips I've ever taken there in a drag strip. I was just sitting, I wish I had brought a book with me, just something to keep me occupied.
Was it off about 10 degrees?
The phasing, yeah, it might have been about that. Might have been about that, yeah.
Did the car rev out in first?
No, didn't rev out anywhere. If you watch the video, it just flatlines. It just the first run I brought up like 2,800 RPM or so, and then you should try to work the converter, right? And that was pointless because there wasn't enough power to work the converter. So the second run, I wanted to take the variable of the converter out, and that's why when I staged the car, I just stood on the brake pedal, stood on the gas, it loaded the converter as much as possible, and this way I could take that out of the equation. I didn't have to say, well, is the converter wrong? Well, if I take the converter out by just leaving, like, stand on the brake, stand on the gas, and then just take your foot off the brake when the light turns green, that's what I did. So that eliminates the possibility of the converter being a problem. It wouldn't pull past that. If you watch the videos, when I take my foot off the brake, the RPM doesn't come up. It just goes, and oozes down the track.
So Sam Issa sent you $10.
Thank you.
It says, please explain why you deleted the mechanical advance. Wouldn't you want less advance at lower RPM?
No, well, this thing shouldn't see RPM or a lower RPM. With the converter in the 4,000 RPM range, when you hit it, okay, when you start with full advance, the motor snaps quicker. So in other words, if you have this centrifugal advance in there, mechanical advance, and let's say you're at 12 degrees at idle, and it's 30 degrees at 2,500 RPM, the engine will rev slower on the initial hit. So when you first hit it, the motor will go "Rah," like that. But with the advance all the way in, when you hit it, the motor goes, it becomes more aggressive. And so it'll hit the converter harder. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Brett McIntyre wants to know how much can you advance it without problems?
I think 30 degrees about, and I've talked to other people who run Slant 6s, and they tell me beyond 30 degrees and the motor starts to fight itself. And from a scientific mechanical standpoint, that makes a lot of sense, given the small bore of these engines.
Hillbilly Hard says, why are you running a high-end gear ratio and a high RPM converter on a low RPM, low-speed engine?
The motor is intended to operate in that range between 4,000 and 6,000 RPM. The head, no matter what you do to this head, no matter what you do to the head, it's a reverse flow head and it has terrible ports. No matter what you do to it, you're going to, and the same thing with the camshaft, same thing with the intake. No matter what you do with this thing, you're going to hit a brick wall at around 6,000 RPM as far as making power goes. It'll spin higher than that, but it won't make power there. And also because of the engine, it's a long rod, it's a small bore, long rod, long stroke motor. So there's nothing below 3,000 RPM and there's nothing above 6,000 RPM. So it's like a tight window that you have to try to make this thing work in. And that's why I chose the components that I did.
Okay. Valve float?
Not a prayer. The valve springs in there, as I said in the video, they're brand new springs. I bought them from Q's Performance. They're stock 340 valve springs, which is more than enough. It's got light valves, it's got light everything. So those springs at the RPM that it's being run at are they're overkill. If the target of this engine is like 6,000 RPM, the stock springs would have worked. Just a couple of shims just to give them a little pressure, and the stock springs would have been fine. But these are 340 springs.
There is a magneto for a Slant 6 by Joe Hunt, but $1,450. Wow.
I don't want to spend that much on a magneto. But I've never seen one. If you can send a picture of it, a description of it, a link to it, uncletonysgarage@gmail.com, I would like to see that.
Let's see. Ever had an alternator cause voltage issues that flatten the engine power?
Not that I recall.
Okay, I'm sure you've checked the shaft and bushings for
Yes.
wear. I'm
Yes.
sure you've checked for dwell change in the distributor.
Yes.
Let's see. You sent links to it, Retro Rabbit? I must have missed it. What exactly is it doing?
It hits a ceiling under 5,000 RPM, 4,800 or so. I should have watched the tack. I didn't watch the tack. I don't have a telltale on it. It reaches, like I said, it has an RPM ceiling, 4,800, 5,000 RPM, and it's not making any power there. And as the car is going down the track, you can feel it. The only way I could describe it is it's a staticky kind of feel. So it's not smooth, it's not vibrating, surging slightly, but staticky is the only way I can describe the feeling that it gives. So idle and low RPM, you give it gas, it's smooth. There's really no vibration, so to speak. Let's just say you're going to drive it, right? I'm just going to drive it to like 50 miles an hour. So it feels fine. It feels fine. It's smooth. It's responsive. It's all good. But when it reaches that range, let's say between 4,500 and 5,000 RPM, give or take, it starts to hold back. And it's not a hold back with a misfire. It's not a hold back with like you know, like that. Nothing like that. It's a staticky feel. So in other words, you reach that RPM and something is happening, I believe in the ignition system, that's preventing the engine from pulling any harder or revving any higher. That's where we're at.
Steam Driven says, love the channel. Uncle T, greetings from the UK.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. From my experience, I think you identified the problem in the coil.
Honestly, I think it's one of those things of stacking clearances, you know, 1,000 here and 2,000 there and 3,000 there, and the next thing you know, it's just flopping around. Well, I think that's what we have here. I think it's just a number of small problems that compounded themselves to just create something that don't want to run.
Okay.
Honestly, everything I'm doing now is stuff that I should have done before we ran the car at all, before we even tried to run the car. But I didn't because I assumed, I know, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, I know, and I saw The Odd Couple in 1971 too, I remember like it was yesterday. But I just wasn't expecting to have the issues or this type of issue with it, so these are things I just didn't bother checking. So now we're going back and we're checking. The difference is, instead of me doing this like in the privacy of my own universe, I'm doing this in YouTube for public consumption.
Could your cam have rounded flatter?
No, cam is fine. I checked, by the way. I checked the lash to make sure the lash was all right. Cold, it's 10, and cold, it's at 12 and 14. Hot lash on these engines on this cam is 10 and 12. So I checked the lash cold. It's at 12 and 14 across the board, so there's no problem there. And what else was there? And yes, I rotated the motor. I watched every cam and every rocker go through its motions several times.
Okay. Is that it?
I don't know. You tell me.
My car is probably legit haunted. You'll figure it out. We have a lot of black thumbs in here. Love the channel and streams. God bless you. Pirate Greg says.
Thank you, Pirate Greg. All right. Is that it?
I think so.
I think we got it. I think we covered pretty much everything. If you did comment in there and I didn't get your comment, I'm sorry, but we're into this thing for 2 hours already, and I was only halfway through the
Brett
comments.
McIntyre just says, want to know your next step. What's your next step?
Put it back together again with the stuff that we did. The car was still sitting on the trailer. I hurt my back a couple of weeks ago. And I was going to pull the car off the trailer. And before I did that, I says, you know what, let me just check this. And I pulled one part off, and I said, well, let me check that. I pulled another part off. Well, let me do this, let me do that. And the next thing you know, this thing is like basically disabled, and I've got the whole ignition system over there. And it's like, well, in order for me to get this thing off the trailer now, I have to push it. And if I push it, I'm going to hurt myself again. So that's why I'm still working on the trailer here. But yeah, the intent is, if it doesn't rain this Saturday, we're definitely going back to the track. As of right now, today's Tuesday, the forecast for Friday
It's
and
rain.
Saturday is showers, or storms rather. So it's probably not going to happen, but I'll be ready to go just in case it does. My intent was to come back here tonight and put all of the stuff back together again, test, fire it, and all the other stuff. But I said, there's so many comments, and there's so many people that want to participate in this. And that's the thing, like, there's this car, this project, this couple of last videos, there's more participation in these videos than I've come across yet, I think. There's always people that will throw suggestions, occasionally, but people seem to really want to get involved in the troubleshooting aspects of this car. And so I think it's kind of unique, and I think that's why I wanted to answer some of those comments and do this live, because it's nice to connect with the viewers on this type of level. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right, so that's it.
Okay.
Guys, I'll give you the status report on this thing as soon as I have status to report. Hopefully we found the bugs and then we can move on and try to make it go fast. But all right, thank you to everybody who contributed with Super Chat. Thanks to everybody who contributed with your conversation and your presence. Thanks for everybody who contributed with suggestions and ideas, right, wrong, or otherwise. I do appreciate your desire to participate. You know, thank you. So that's it, guys. We're going to tune out now, and hopefully the next time you see me will be on our regular Sunday Night Live, Sunday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. And that's it. Good night, all.